How can a simple, quiet accusation become the moment your marriage ends? What happens when the jokes you make about your husband's insecurities turn into the receipts that destroy your life? This is the story of how my laughter became the last sound before everything fell apart. I thought I was so clever. Standing there at the rooftop bar, watching Grant's face tighten as Callum spun me around on the makeshift dance floor, I felt this rush of power. Like I was finally in control of something in my boring, predictable life. "Come on, Grant," I called over the music, my voice carrying that teasing tone I'd perfected over the years. "Don't be such a stick in the mud, it's just dancing." My husband sat at our table, nursing his beer, those dark eyes of his tracking every movement. At 36, Grant too was still handsome in that quiet, intellectual way. The kind of man who wore button-down shirts even on weekends and actually read the financial section of the newspaper. But God, he was boring. Callum's hand found the small of my back as the song changed to something slower. He was everything Grant wasn't, spontaneous, charming, the kind of guy who made jokes that actually landed. At 32, he had this easy confidence that made everyone at the marketing firm gravitate toward him during office happy hours. "Your husband looks like he wants to murder me," Callum whispered in my ear, his breath warm against my skin. I glanced back at Grant and felt that familiar mix of irritation and guilt. "He's just jealous. He thinks every man who talks to me wants to steal me away." "Smart man," Callum said, and something in his tone made my stomach flutter. The evening had started innocently enough. It was supposed to be a celebration for our friends Marcus and Jennifer's vow renewal ceremony. The whole marketing team was there, plus spouses, creating this festive atmosphere 30 stories above downtown. But somehow, it had turned into another one of those nights where Grant retreated into himself, while I tried to prove I was still fun, still desirable. "Lysandra." Grant's voice cut through the music as he appeared beside us. "We should head home. Maisie has soccer practice early tomorrow." Our 7-year-old daughter, always the responsible parent, always thinking ahead. I felt Callum's hand slip away from my waist as Grant's presence created this awkward triangle. "Already?" I pouted, though part of me was relieved. The wine was making me bolder than usual, and I could feel the eyes of our co-workers tracking this little domestic drama. "The night's just getting started." "It's past 11, Grant said simply. He wasn't angry, which somehow made it worse. Anger I could fight against. This calm disappointment was harder to deflect. Jennifer appeared at my elbow, slightly tipsy and grinning. "Oh my God, Lysandra, you and Callum should totally recreate your walk down the aisle for the video." Before I could protest or think it through, she was pulling out her phone, and Callum was offering me his arm with that devil-may-care smile. The crowd of co-workers formed an impromptu aisle, cheering and laughing. "This is ridiculous," I said, but I was already taking Callum's arm, already letting him lead me through the makeshift ceremony, while Jennifer filmed and everyone applauded. I caught Grant's face in my peripheral vision. He'd gone completely still, like he was watching something break in slow motion, but the attention felt so good, the laughter and cheers washing over me like validation I didn't even know I'd been craving. Later, in the Uber home, Grant stared out the window while I scrolled through the videos Jennifer had already posted to the company group chat. "Look how cute this turned out," I said, angling my phone toward him. "It's just silly fun." He glanced at the screen where Callum and I were walking arm in arm, my face bright with laughter, his hand resting possessively on mine. In the background, you could just make out Grant sitting alone at our table, his expression unreadable. "Hilarious," Grant said flatly. "Oh, come on, don't be like this." I nudged his shoulder playfully. "It's not like I actually married him." Grant turned to look at me then, and something in his eyes made my stomach clench. "No," he said quietly. "You just let him walk you down the aisle while your actual husband watched from the audience." The rest of the ride passed in silence. At home, I went through my usual routine, checking on Maisie, washing my face, changing into pajamas, but Grant was nowhere to be found. I finally discovered him in the spare room, making up the pull-out couch with military precision. "What are you doing?" I asked from the doorway. "Going to sleep?" He didn't look up from tucking in the sheets. "Grant, you're being ridiculous. It was a joke. A harmless joke." He straightened, holding a pillow against his chest like armor. "Was it?" "Of course it was. God, when did you become so paranoid?" For a moment, he just studied my face like he was trying to solve some complex equation. Then he shook his head and turned back to the bed. "Good night, Lysandra." I stood there for another minute, waiting for him to change his mind, to laugh it off, to be the understanding husband who rolled his eyes at my antics but forgave them. Instead, he climbed into the narrow bed and turned off the lamp, leaving me standing in the dark hallway. Back in our bedroom, my bedroom now apparently, I pulled out my phone and watched the video again. Callum and I did look good together, natural, fun, like the kind of couple who went on spontaneous weekend trips and tried new restaurants and didn't spend their Friday nights discussing mortgage rates and Maisie's college fund. I posted the video to my own social media with the caption, "When your work husband gives better aisle walks than your real one." Just kidding, Jashchan or Rami. The likes and comments started rolling in immediately. My friend Sienna wrote, "Yas's queen." My mother commented, "You look radiant, sweetheart." But it was Callum's response that made my pulse quicken. "Anytime you need a stand-in groom." I was still smiling at my phone when I heard Grant's alarm go off in the spare room at 6 a.m. By the time I dragged myself to the kitchen for coffee, he was already dressed for work, packing Maisie's lunch with the same methodical care he brought to everything. "Morning, Daddy," Maisie chirped from her spot at the breakfast bar, swinging her legs as she ate cereal. "Morning, Princess." Grant's whole face softened when he looked at our daughter. "Ready for soccer practice?" "Uh-huh. Mummy, why didn't Daddy sleep in your room last night?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. I felt Grant's eyes on me as I poured coffee, with hands that weren't quite steady. "Daddy was just giving Mommy some space," I said carefully. "Sometimes grown-ups need space." "Oh." Maisie considered this with the serious expression she got when trying to understand adult logic. "Like when I need space from Tommy Morrison because he's annoying." Grant made a sound that might have been a laugh or a cough. "Something like that, sweetheart." After he left to drop Maisie at school, I sat alone in our sterile apartment, scrolling through the responses to my video. The attention felt good, but underneath it was this nagging sense that I'd crossed some invisible line last night. Grant's face kept flashing in my memory, that moment when he'd gone completely still, watching me let another man walk me down an aisle while he sat forgotten in the background. But then Callum texted, "Coffee later. I promised not to propose." And just like that, the guilt evaporated, replaced by that familiar flutter of excitement. Grant was being dramatic as usual. It was just harmless flirtation, the kind of thing that kept marriages interesting. He'd get over it. He always did. The marketing office buzzed with Monday morning energy, but I could feel the undercurrent of whispered conversations as I made my way to my desk. The weekend's video had apparently made more rounds than I'd anticipated. Well, Sienna said, appearing at my cubicle with 2 cups of coffee and a knowing smile. "Someone's the talk of the office today." "Is that good or bad?" I asked, though part of me already knew. "Depends on who you ask." She settled into the chair beside my desk, lowering her voice. "HR got some complaints about your social media post. Apparently, some people think it was inappropriate workplace behavior." My stomach dropped. It was a joke, at a work party, off company property. I know that, and you know that, but... Sienna glanced around to make sure we weren't being overheard. Janet from accounting showed it to her husband, and he apparently had some very strong opinions about married women who let other men walk them down aisles. Janet from accounting, can mind her own damn business. I'm just saying, maybe keep things a little more low-key for a while, at least until the gossip dies down. But keeping things low-key had never been my strong suit. When Callum stopped by my desk around 10 with a latte and a croissant, I felt that same rush of validation I'd experienced at the rooftop bar. "Thought you might need some fuel after your starring role this weekend," he said, perching on the edge of my desk in a way that was casual, but somehow intimate. "You're terrible," I said, but I was smiling as I accepted the coffee. "Grant's barely speaking to me." "His loss." Callum's eyes held mine for a beat longer than necessary. "Some men don't know how to appreciate what they have." Around us, I could feel the subtle shift in attention as co-workers pretended to focus on their screens while actually tracking our interaction. It should have made me uncomfortable, but instead, it felt electric, like I was the star of some romantic drama instead of a 34-year-old marketing coordinator with a mortgage and a minivan. That evening, Grant was already home when I arrived, sitting at the kitchen counter with his laptop open and papers spread around him. He looked up when I entered, and I noticed the dark circles under his eyes. "Long day?" I asked, setting down my purse and keys. "You could say that." His voice was neutral, giving nothing away. "How was yours?" "Fine. Normal. You know." I busied myself checking the mail, avoiding his gaze. "Where's Maisie?" "Soccer practice ran late. I picked her up an hour ago. She's in her room doing homework." We moved around each other in the kitchen with the careful choreography of people avoiding conflict. I heated up leftover Chinese food while Grant continued whatever he was working on, the silence stretching between us like a rubber band ready to snap. "Grant," I finally said, settling across from him with my plate. "About this weekend." "It's fine, Lysandra." "No, it's not. You're sleeping in the spare room and barely talking to me. Clearly it's not fine." He looked up from his laptop then, and I was struck by how tired he seemed. "What do you want me to say?" "I want you to stop punishing me for having fun. I want you to remember that we used to laugh together, that we used to enjoy each other's company." The words came out more defensive than I'd intended. "I want you to stop being so jealous all the time." Something flickered across Grant's face. Hurt, maybe, or disappointment. "Is that what you think this is? Jealousy?" "Isn't it?" He was quiet for a long moment, studying my face like he was trying to memorize it. "When's the last time you changed your phone password?" The question was so unexpected that I almost choked on my lo mein. "What?" "Your phone password. You changed it last week, and your laptop password the week before that." "So, I change my passwords regularly. It's good security practice." "You've never done that before. In 8 years of marriage, you've never once changed a password without telling me." My heart started beating faster, though I couldn't quite say why. "I don't have to tell you everything, Grant. I'm allowed to have some privacy." "Of course you are." He closed his laptop and gathered his papers with that same methodical precision he brought to everything. "I'm just trying to understand when privacy became secrecy." "They're not the same thing." "Aren't they?" He stood, tucking his laptop under his arm. "When you change passwords without explanation, when you start working late 3 nights a week without warning, when you let other men walk you down aisles while your husband watches from the audience, what would you call that?" "I would call that living my life without having to report every detail to you like you're my parole officer." The words hung in the air between us, sharper than I'd intended. Grant's face went very still, and I realized I'd said something that couldn't be taken back. "Right," he said quietly. "Well, I'll let you get back to living your life then." He was halfway to the spare room when I called after him. "Grant, wait. I didn't mean—" But the door was already closing, leaving me alone in the kitchen with my rapidly cooling Chinese food and the uncomfortable feeling that I'd just failed some test I didn't even know I was taking. Later that night, after Maisie was asleep, I found myself scrolling through my phone, looking for something to distract from the guilt gnawing at my stomach. Callum had sent a text around 9. Hope your evening's better than your morning. Coffee tomorrow? I stared at the message for a long time before typing back. Definitely. I could use a friend. Always here for you, came his immediate response, followed by a heart emoji that made my pulse quicken. From down the hall, I could hear Grant's alarm clock ticking in the spare room, marking time in the darkness. I thought about going to him, about apologizing for my sharp words, and trying to explain the restlessness that had been eating at me for months. But what would I say? That I was bored, that I felt invisible, that sometimes I looked at our life together and wondered if this was all there was. Instead, I turned off my phone and tried to sleep, telling myself that things would look better in the morning. They always did. But when I woke up at 6 a.m., Grant's side of our bed was still empty, and I could hear him moving around in the spare room with the quiet efficiency of someone who'd made a decision. The coffee was already made when I stumbled to the kitchen, but he was gone, leaving only a note that Maisie's soccer gear was in the dryer and her permission slip for the field trip needed to be signed. No, good morning. No, have a good day. Just the practical details of shared parenting, stripped of any warmth or intimacy. I was still staring at the note when my phone buzzed with a text from Callum. Ready for that coffee? I know a place. And despite everything, despite Grant's hurt eyes, and Maisie's confused questions and the whispers at work, I found myself typing back, yes, send me the address. Because sometimes, when your husband treats you like a roommate instead of a wife, you need someone to remind you that you're still worth pursuing, even if that someone isn't the man you married. The coffee shop Callum had chosen was one of those trendy places with exposed brick walls and baristas who looked like they moonlighted in indie bands. It was also, I realized as we settled into a corner booth, exactly the kind of place where we were likely to run into someone from work. This is nice, Callum said, sliding a cappuccino across the table to me. We should do this more often. Probably not the best idea, I said, but I was smiling as I said it. People are already talking. Let them talk. He leaned back in his chair, completely at ease. Life's too short to worry about office gossip. Easy for you to say. You're not the one HR pulled aside yesterday. His eyebrows shot up. They actually talked to you. Just a friendly reminder about maintaining professional boundaries. I made air quotes around the phrase, rolling my eyes. Apparently, my social media presence is reflecting poorly on company culture. That's ridiculous. What you do in your personal time is your business. Tell that to my husband. The words slipped out before I could stop them, and Callum's expression shifted to something more serious. Things still rough at home? I found myself telling him everything. Grant's move to the spare room, the password comments, the way he looked at me like I was some puzzle he couldn't solve. Callum listened with the kind of focused attention I couldn't remember getting from Grant in months. Sounds like he's trying to control you, Callum said when I finished, making you feel guilty for having friends, for enjoying yourself. That's not healthy. I don't think it's about control, I said, though doubt crept into my voice. I think he's just insecure. Same thing, really. Callum reached across the table and covered my hand with his. You deserve better than someone who makes you feel bad for being yourself. His touch sent a jolt of electricity up my arm, and I didn't pull away as quickly as I should have. When I finally did, I could feel heat creeping up my neck. I should probably get back to work, I said, though I made no move to leave. Probably, he agreed, but his eyes held mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. We sat there for another 20 minutes, talking about everything and nothing, his hand finding mine again across the table. When we finally left, he walked me to my car, standing close enough that I could smell his cologne. Thanks for this, I said, fumbling with my keys. I needed someone to listen. Anytime. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, the gesture intimate and tender. You know I care about you, right? Before I could respond, he leaned down and kissed my cheek, his lips lingering just a beat too long to be purely friendly. Then he was walking away, leaving me standing beside my car, with my heart pounding and my cheek burning where his lips had touched. That evening was Maisie's school play, one of those elaborate productions that required both parents to attend and pretend everything was normal. Grant and I sat side by side in the auditorium, maintaining the fiction of a happy marriage while our daughter sang about friendship and sharing. "She looks beautiful up there," I whispered, and Grant nodded without looking at me. "She's been practicing that song for weeks." It was the longest conversation we'd had in days, and even that felt stilted, performative. Around us, other couples chatted and laughed, hands intertwined, looking like actual partners instead of reluctant co-parents. After the show, we lingered in the lobby while Maisie changed out of her costume, surrounded by other families celebrating their children's performances. I was scrolling through the photos I'd taken when I noticed Grant's mother, Ruth, approaching with his brother Jamie in tow. "Wonderful performance," Ruth said, kissing my cheek with the perfunctory affection she'd shown me for 8 years. "Maisie has such a lovely voice." "She gets it from her father," I said automatically, the kind of small talk that had become second nature. But Ruth was studying my face with those sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You look tired, dear. Everything all right?" "Just busy with work," I said, forcing a smile. "You know how it is." Ruth's gaze flicked between Grant and me, taking in the careful distance we maintained, the way we avoided looking directly at each other. "Grant, why don't you and Jamie get the car? Lysandra and I can wait for Maisie." It wasn't really a suggestion, and Grant knew better than to argue with his mother. Once they were gone, Ruth turned to me with the directness that had always made me uncomfortable. "How long have you been having an affair?" The question hit me like a physical blow. "Excuse me?" "You heard me." Ruth's voice was calm, matter of fact. "I've been married for 35 years, dear. I know what a guilty conscience looks like." "I'm not—" I started, but the words died in my throat under her steady gaze. "Grant's been sleeping in the spare room for a week. He looks like he hasn't slept properly in months. And you—" She gestured vaguely at my face. "You have that glow women get when they're getting attention from someone who isn't their husband." "Ruth, I think you're misunderstanding." "Am I?" She pulled out her phone and showed me a screenshot of my social media post from the weekend. "Because this looks like a woman who's forgotten she's already married." My mouth went dry. It was a joke, a harmless joke at a work party. "Nothing about this looks harmless to me." Ruth's voice was steel, wrapped in velvet. "And nothing about the way you're looking at that man looks like a joke." Before I could respond, Maisie came bounding over in her regular clothes, chattering excitedly about the performance. Ruth's expression immediately softened as she scooped up her granddaughter, but her eyes remained hard when they met mine. "Think carefully about what you're doing, Lysandra," she said quietly. "Some mistakes can't be undone." The drive home was silent except for Maisie's continued chatter about the play. Grant's hands were tight on the steering wheel, his jaw set in that way that meant he was thinking hard about something. I stared out the passenger window and wondered how Ruth had seen through me so easily when Grant seemed oblivious. Or maybe he wasn't oblivious. Maybe he was just waiting for me to hang myself with enough rope. That night, after Maisie was asleep, I found Grant in the spare room, sitting on the edge of the narrow bed with his laptop open. He looked up when I appeared in the doorway, his expression carefully neutral. "Good show tonight," he said. "Grant, we need to talk." "Do we?" He closed the laptop and set it aside, giving me his full attention for the first time in days. "What about?" I opened my mouth to tell him about my coffee with Callum, about Ruth's accusations, about the guilt that was eating me alive. Instead, what came out was, "This, us, the way you're treating me like I'm some kind of criminal." "How am I treating you exactly?" "Like you don't trust me, like you're waiting for me to do something wrong so you can say, 'I told you so.'" Grant was quiet for a long moment, studying my face with that same intense focus I'd noticed lately. "Have I accused you of anything?" "No, but..." Have I asked you to stop seeing your friends or change your behavior in any way? No, but the way you look at me, the way I look at you is the way a man looks at his wife when he's trying to figure out if she still wants to be his wife. The words hung between us like a challenge. I felt my chest tighten with something that might have been panic. Of course I want to be your wife. That's a ridiculous thing to say. Is it? Grant stood up, moving to the small window that looked out over our parking lot. Because lately, it feels like you're auditioning for a different role entirely. What's that supposed to mean? He turned back to me, and in the dim light from the hallway, his face looked older than his 36 years. It means I'm tired of competing with whatever fantasy you've built in your head about what your life should look like. I don't have any fantasies, don't you? His voice was quiet but firm. The woman who posts videos of herself with other men while her husband sits in the background. The woman who changes passwords and works late and lights up like a Christmas tree when certain people text her. That woman seems to have very specific fantasies about what she wants. My phone, sitting on the dresser in our bedroom, chose that moment to buzz with an incoming text. We both heard it, and I saw something shift in Grant's expression. You should get that, he said. It might be important. But we both knew who it was, and we both knew that whatever line we'd been walking for the past week, we were about to cross it. I just didn't know yet that Grant had already decided to let me. The text was from Callum. Can't stop thinking about our coffee today. When can I see you again? I stared at the message, my heart hammering against my ribs. From the spare room came the soft sound of Grant closing the door, and I realized he'd seen my face when I read it, seen the flush that crept up my neck, the way my breath caught. I typed back quickly. Soon. Things are complicated right now. His response was immediate. I'm patient. You're worth waiting for. I should have deleted the conversation. Should have blocked his number and marched into that spare room to confess everything to Grant. Instead, I found myself smiling at my phone like a teenager with her first crush. The next morning, Grant was gone before I woke up. No coffee made, no note about Maisie's schedule. Just the echo of his absence, and the uncomfortable realization that I'd slept better alone than I had in months. At work, Callum stopped by my desk with lunch from that trendy sandwich place downtown. Thought you might be hungry, he said, settling into the chair beside my desk like he belonged there. You don't have to keep bringing me food, I said, but I was already unwrapping the sandwich gratefully. I want to take care of you. His voice was low enough that only I could hear it, intimate in a way that made my stomach flutter. Someone should. Around us, the office hummed with its usual midday energy, but I was hyper-aware of the glances from co-workers, the way conversations seemed to quiet when Callum and I were together. Janet from accounting walked by twice, her disapproval radiating like heat. People are staring, I murmured. Let them. Callum leaned closer, his hand brushing mine as he reached for his own sandwich. I'm not ashamed of wanting to spend time with you. It's not that simple. Isn't it? His eyes held mine with that intensity I was becoming addicted to. You're unhappy. I make you happy. Everything else is just noise. That afternoon, HR called me into a meeting. Sarah Chen, the director, sat across from me with a file folder and an expression that meant business. Lysandra, we need to discuss your recent social media activity and its impact on workplace dynamics. My mouth went dry. I'm not sure what you mean. I think you do. Sarah opened the folder and pulled out printouts of my posts, the video from the rooftop bar, several photos of Callum and me at various work events, comments that suddenly seemed more flirtatious than friendly when viewed through HR's lens. Multiple employees have expressed concern about the appropriateness of your relationship with Mr. Reese. We're friends, co-workers. There's nothing inappropriate about... Lysandra. Sarah's voice was firm but not unkind. I'm going to be direct because I think you're a valuable employee, and I don't want to see you make a mistake that affects your career. The nature of your interactions with Mr. Reese is creating a hostile work environment for other employees and reflects poorly on our company culture. A hostile work environment? We haven't done anything. You've been seen having intimate lunches off-site. You post photos and videos that suggest a relationship beyond professional collegiality. And frankly, the fact that you're married makes this entire situation problematic from multiple angles. The words hit me like cold water. Are you saying I can't be friends with my co-workers? I'm saying you need to maintain appropriate boundaries. No more off-site meetings with Mr. Reese unless they're work-related and include other team members. No more personal social media posts featuring company employees in potentially compromising situations. And I strongly suggest you consider whether your current behavior aligns with your professional goals. I walked back to my desk in a daze, Sarah's words echoing in my head. Callum was waiting for me, perched on the edge of my desk with that easy smile that usually made everything better. "How did it go?" he asked. "Not well." I glanced around to make sure we weren't being overheard. "They want us to stop having lunch together, stop hanging out outside of work." His expression darkened. "They can't control what you do in your personal time. They can if it affects my job." "So, what are you saying? That you're going to let them dictate who you can and can't see?" The question hung between us, loaded with implication. I looked at his face, handsome, concerned, focused entirely on me, and felt that familiar rush of being wanted, being chosen. "No," I said quietly. "I'm not going to let them dictate anything." His smile was brilliant. "Good. Because I was thinking we could grab dinner tonight. Somewhere private where we don't have to worry about office politics." Every rational part of my brain screamed that this was a bad idea, that I was married, that I had a daughter, that I was about to cross a line I couldn't uncross. But the rational part of my brain had been losing ground for weeks to the part that was tired of being taken for granted, tired of feeling invisible. "Okay," I said, "but somewhere out of town. I can't risk running into anyone we know." That evening, I told Grant I was having dinner with Sienna to discuss some personal issues. The lie rolled off my tongue so easily it scared me. "Will you be late?" he asked without looking up from his laptop. "Probably. Don't wait up." He nodded absently, already absorbed in whatever spreadsheet had captured his attention. No questions about where we were going, what personal issues Sienna and I needed to discuss, when I might be home. Either he trusted me completely, or he'd already checked out of our marriage entirely. The restaurant Callum chose was an hour outside the city, tucked into a converted farmhouse, with dim lighting and private booths. The kind of place couples went for romantic dinners, not co-workers grabbing a friendly meal. "This is beautiful," I said as the hostess led us to a corner table, lit by candles and fairy lights. "I wanted somewhere special." Callum pulled out my chair with old-fashioned courtesy. "You deserve special." Over dinner, he told me about his childhood in Oregon, his dreams of starting his own marketing firm, his belief that life was too short to settle for anything less than passion. I found myself sharing things I hadn't talked about in years, my college ambitions, my fear that I was becoming invisible in my own life, my growing certainty that I'd married too young and settled too easily. "You're not invisible," Callum said, reaching across the table to take my hand. "You're radiant. Anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve you." The wine made everything feel soft around the edges, made his touch seem natural and right. When he suggested we take a walk around the property after dinner, I didn't hesitate. The night air was cool and sweet with the scent of jasmine. We walked slowly along a path lit by solar lights, our conversation flowing like we'd known each other for years instead of months. When we reached a small gazebo overlooking a pond, Callum stopped and turned to face me. "Lysandra," he said, and something in his voice made my heart race. "I need you to know how I feel about you." "Callum, no, let me say this." His hands found my face, thumbs tracing my cheekbones with reverent tenderness. "I'm falling in love with you. I know it's complicated, I know it's messy, but I can't pretend anymore that this is just friendship." Before I could respond, he was kissing me. Soft at first, then deeper when I didn't pull away. His hands tangled in my hair, and I felt 8 years of careful respectability dissolve like sugar in rain. When we finally broke apart, I was breathless and shaking. "I can't," I whispered. "I'm married. I have a daughter." "I know." His forehead rested against mine, his breathing as ragged as my own. "But you're also unhappy, and life is too short to stay in a marriage that makes you feel like you're disappearing." We drove back to the city in charged silence, my hand in his across the center console. He walked me to my car in the restaurant parking lot where I'd left it, kissing me again against the driver's side door with a passion that made my knees weak. "Think about what I said," he murmured against my lips. "Think about what you really want." The drive home passed in a blur of guilt and exhilaration. I felt like I was living in someone else's life, making someone else's choices. The responsible mother and wife I'd been that morning seemed like a stranger. Grant was still awake when I got home, sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop and a cup of tea. He looked up when I entered, and I wondered if he could see the change in me, if guilt was written across my face in bold letters. "How was dinner?" he asked. "Fine, good. Sienna's having some issues with her boyfriend." The lies came so easily now, stacking on top of each other like building blocks. Grant nodded and turned back to his screen. "I'm going to be working late. Don't wait up." I wanted to ask what he was working on, why he was spending so many evenings hunched over spreadsheets and documents. But asking questions meant opening myself up to questions in return, and I wasn't ready for that conversation. Instead, I went to bed alone, Callum's words echoing in my mind. "Think about what you really want." The problem was, I was starting to know exactly what I wanted, and it wasn't the life I'd built with Grant. The next few weeks fell into a dangerous rhythm. Stolen lunches with Callum at restaurants across town, text messages that grew increasingly intimate, late-night phone calls when Grant was working in his makeshift office. I told myself we weren't really having an affair. We'd only kissed a few times, held hands, shared dinners that felt more like dates than friendly meals. But I knew I was lying to myself as much as I was lying to Grant. "You're glowing," Sienna said one afternoon as we grabbed coffee near my office. "Whatever you're doing, keep it up." I felt heat creep up my neck. "I'm not doing anything special." "Come on, Lise. We've been friends for 15 years. I know when you're keeping secrets." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Is this about that guy from work? Callum?" "It's not what you think. What I think is that you look happier than you have in months. And if some harmless flirtation with a cute coworker is putting that smile on your face, then good for you." "It's not harmless," I said quietly, "and it's not just flirtation anymore." Sienna's eyebrows shot up. "How not harmless are we talking?" I found myself telling her everything. The dinners, the kisses, the way Callum made me feel like I was worth pursuing. Sienna listened with the rapt attention of someone watching a particularly engaging soap opera. "Holy shit, Lise, you're having an affair." "I'm not sleeping with him." "Yet." She sat back in her chair, studying my face. "But you want to." The truth of it hit me like a physical blow. "Yes," I whispered. "God help me, yes." "So what's stopping you?" "I'm married. I have a daughter. I have a life." "A life that makes you miserable." Sienna reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Look, I'm not saying you should blow up your marriage for some office romance, but maybe this is a wake-up call. Maybe it's time to figure out what you actually want instead of just going through the motions." That evening, Grant was in his usual spot at the kitchen table when I got home, surrounded by papers and printouts. He'd been working on some mysterious project for weeks, staying up late into the night with the focused intensity he usually reserved for budget reports. "What's all this?" I asked, gesturing at the scattered documents. He looked up, and I was struck again by how tired he seemed. "Just some research I'm doing." "For work?" "Something like that. He closed a folder and stacked it with the others. How was your day? Fine. Normal. I busied myself checking the mail, avoiding his gaze. Where's Maisie? Homework. She has that science project due tomorrow. We moved around each other with the practiced choreography of people sharing space without really connecting. I heated up leftovers, while Grant continued his work, the silence stretching between us like a gulf that grew wider every day. Grant, I said finally, settling across from him with my plate. Are we okay? He looked up from his papers, and for a moment, I saw something raw and vulnerable in his eyes. Are we? I don't know. That's why I'm asking. He was quiet for a long moment, studying my face like he was trying to solve some complex equation. Do you love me, Lysandra? The question caught me off guard. Of course I love you. You're my husband. That's not what I asked. I felt my chest tighten. I don't understand the difference. Don't you? Grant closed his laptop and leaned back in his chair. Loving someone because they're your husband is different from loving someone because you choose to, every day, despite all the other choices you could make. I choose you every day. Do you? His voice was quiet but steady. Because lately, it feels like you're choosing everything and everyone except me. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Callum that I'd been waiting for all day. Grant's eyes flicked to it, then back to my face, and I saw something shift in his expression. You should get that, he said. It might be important. But I didn't move, couldn't move, under the weight of his steady gaze. We sat there in silence, the phone buzzing again, both of us knowing that whatever was happening between us was about to reach some kind of breaking point. I'm trying to save our marriage, Grant said finally, but I can't do it alone. I never asked you to save anything. No, he agreed. You didn't, but someone has to, because what we're doing now isn't working for either of us. That night, I lay in our empty bed, listening to Grant move around in the spare room, the soft sounds of him settling in for another night alone. My phone glowed on the nightstand with unread messages from Callum, but I couldn't bring myself to look at them. Instead, I found myself thinking about Grant's question. Do you love me? Not as a husband, not as the father of my child, not as the safe choice I'd made at 26, but as the man he was, flaws and all, boring spreadsheets and quiet intensity, and the way he made Maisie laugh until she snorted. The answer should have been simple. After 8 years of marriage, it should have been automatic. The fact that it wasn't scared me more than anything else that had happened in the past month. The next day, Callum suggested we meet for lunch at a hotel restaurant downtown. Somewhere we can talk privately, he said, and something in his tone made my pulse quicken. The restaurant was elegant and dimly lit, filled with business travelers and tourists who wouldn't recognize us. Callum had reserved a corner booth that felt intimate and secluded, like our own private world. I've been thinking about what you said, he told me over wine and pasta, about it being complicated. It is complicated. Only because you're making it complicated. He reached across the table and took my hand. I know you feel what I feel. I know you want this as much as I do. It's not about what I want. It's about what's right. Says who? Your husband who takes you for granted. Society that tells women they have to settle for marriages that make them miserable. His thumb traced circles on my palm, sending shivers up my arm. You get one life, Lysandra. One chance to be happy. Don't waste it on someone who doesn't appreciate what he has. After lunch, he walked me to the elevator, pressing me against the wall as we waited for it to arrive. His kiss was hungry, desperate, and I felt the last of my resistance crumble. Come upstairs with me, he whispered against my lips, just for an hour. Just to talk. I knew it wouldn't be just talking. Knew that if I got in that elevator with him, I'd be crossing a line I could never uncross. But his hands were in my hair, and his body was pressed against mine, and for the first time in months, I felt alive. Okay, I whispered. Just for an hour. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped inside, my heart pounding as Callum pressed the button for the 15th floor. As the doors closed, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the polished steel. Flushed, breathless, looking like a woman about to make the biggest mistake of her life. Or maybe, I thought as Callum's hand found mine, the first right choice I'd made in years. The hotel room felt elegant and empty as Callum poured wine and toasted new beginnings. I let the flirting go too far until panic snapped me back and I fled in tears, ashamed of what I'd almost done. Guilt followed me home, where Grant waited in the kitchen, calm and distant. He already knew, a private investigator, photos, dates, the hotel. I tried to explain, but it didn't matter. I hadn't protected our marriage. I'd negotiated against it. Grant said he was done. Days later, divorce papers arrived. 8 years of marriage, reduced to evidence. I gambled everything on a fantasy, and lost.